Hello and welcome to Coffee with Carey. I appreciate you stopping by today. You want some rules? I got some rules. Actually, I use the word rules very loosely because there's no such thing as rules. It's all gray area, black and white. This is blue and white, but black and white is not much as black and white, I don't believe. I think there's a lot of gray to make room for all of us and our own unique who we are, unique experiences, unique situations. So take the word rules with a grain of salt and hope that these are going to be some suggestions or rules that will help you as you put yourself out there dating. It's a first date. Some of them may be applicable for second and subsequent dates as well, but let's focus on 10 rules for first date. Whether you have never dated before, you're getting back out there after a long absence from the dating world, or you're out there every weekend dating and just want to make sure things are going as best they can. That's what's on the agenda today. So if that's interesting, hope you'll stick around. Number 1, be a fantastic listener, and the best way to do this is to set yourself a goal of doing 40% of the talking. It seems to work out that if people aim for 40, they notice if they're talking way too much and taking up 80, and if they're doing less, they kind of notice they're not pulling their weight. And more people, when they're nervous, have a tendency to talk more or to absolutely clam up and not know what to say. Do have some episodes on what to say. I'll link to that here and at the end of the episode. But you should be able to keep a balance in the conversation if you aim for 40. And then don't forget, all that listening doesn't mean you're not talking. Make sure you have some great questions. Get my free guide with 33 questions down in the description below. Get that conversation started and going in a great direction where you're going to learn some quality information about this person. Set the tone by not only having a balanced back and forth, but also focusing on, as I always say, sharing stories and asking some really great interesting questions that will help you get to really know who this person is and what their values are about. Number 2 is pretty simple. No baggage. Leave the baggage out there. We're not going to be talking about bad dates. We're not going to be talking about past relationships, divorces, breakups, dating in general. Steer clear of the whole baggage thing and leave that behind because it's really kind of negative, and no one ever walked away from a date with somebody who dropped all their baggage on the table and said they were super interesting and really charming. It's not charming. It's a turnoff for most people, and you'd be well advised. That's why I'm advising it to avoid it. Number 3, maybe you've heard me tell you that I don't think you should sit like this with somebody with whom you're having a first date. It really is a teachable moment or an interview or imparting of information. It's not very conversational. If we were in person, I would want to change the angles here to include you in the conversation. So I advise that people don't sit right across from each other, but they sit kitty corner or Caty Corner, depending on where you live, what you call that situation. That means 90 degrees or adjacent to one another. Doing that really sets up a more intimate conversation to happen, and the body language is easier. If in fact you wanted to put your hand on their arm to accentuate a point, you felt like you did want to make a connection, that's much less awkward than having to reach across the table or to pat somebody's hand, or if it goes really, really well, to be holding hands across the table. You could easily do that if you were sitting on a corner to each other. Also, at the bar, if you're actually out for dinner or having a beverage after a date, or however that works out, you met at a place where you're listening to live music with a friend and now you find yourself on a date, it's a great way to sit where you're interacting in a much more casual manner and not so official. Number 4, no negativity would be the rule I would suggest. If this has been like the worst day you've had in months, or you're feeling cruddy, allergies, cramps, a cold, bad day at work, reschedule the date. You just don't want to bring that energy with you to an opportunity to connect with somebody. It's going to distract you. It's going to hover over this date as not something positive for sure. And if that conversation starts being negative, be prepared to take it in a different direction that is more positive. If it's been on the books for a long time and you have a sniffle, I'm not saying be a baby and cancel and maybe lose the opportunity to meet this person. I've had dates scheduled for people where they wanted to cancel. I'm like, take a cold tablet, for heaven's sakes. I've had this date planned for a month. Took quite a while to align your schedules. And now you just because you have a couple sniffles, you're not feeling your best. Put on your big girl pants and go. I'm not saying that, everything's not perfect, I can't go. Nothing's ever perfect. But if you could take a Tylenol or a Alka-Seltzer and be a great version of yourself, by all means, go ahead. But don't bring the negativity. Don't talk about the fact that you were feeling crappy all day. That just throws something else into the conversation that isn't positive. And don't forget, a date is to learn about somebody that you don't know well. What are they learning about you? That you're a negative person? And you're probably not. So why bring that with you? In fact, don't. Number 5 has to do with the length of the date. And as a matchmaker, I would say the average for most dates that I set up were an hour and a half without me really saying it until I started saying it. But that would be my recommendation. I'd say anything less than an hour and a half starts to feel like it didn't work out. So if it's not working out, there's red flags, there's deal breakers all over the place, then by all means, after an hour, excuse yourself. But if things are going well, a standard typical date is an hour and a half to 2 hours. And then I don't think that you should extend it beyond much more than 2 hours either. I feel that that is too much too soon, perhaps. And also you want to leave them wanting more. You want to leave on a positive up note and have people looking forward to seeing each other again because they're excited about it and there's so much more to discover. So an hour and a half to 2 hours is my ideal. Is it yours? Number 6 is, I've always said, a 2-drink maximum if you're somewhere and drinking alcohol. I would prefer actually that nobody were drinking alcohol because it's not good for you. But my concern in this situation is that I don't want anybody to not feel that they're in complete control of the decisions they're making and the self that they are presenting. Don't want anybody sharing things that they're disappointed they shared the next day or feel like they didn't really hold up their end of the conversation because they were a little random. Lots of reasons that alcohol can interfere with us being our best selves on a first date. But if your date is an hour and a half or 2 hours, keep that in mind as well. And if you will be drinking alcohol on your date, make sure that you've made arrangements so that you're not driving. Call an Uber or have a friend pick you up. I want you to be around for date number 2. Rule number 7 would be to use this first date to start setting your boundaries. And what I mean by that is starting at least with the physicality of, touching you or the way they speak to you. If anything strikes you as inappropriate or makes you uncomfortable, a lot of sexual innuendo or jokes that you find offensive for some reason, somebody touching your arm or your leg or sitting too closely where they're against you, trying to hold your hand. This is the place that you get to tell what is fine with you and what is not. And I think letting somebody know that you don't put up with things you don't like is great on a first date. No reason to suffer through anything that's making you uncomfortable and looking like you're a person who doesn't have boundaries, because the person's going to read your body language if they're paying any attention at all and see that that makes you uncomfortable. But if you say nothing, then you kind of seem like somebody who doesn't know how to stand up for themselves, and you do. So if they are touching your hand, you could say, "Oh, excuse me," and then move your hand away. Or if they ask if they can sit close to you, say, "I feel really comfortable the way things are now, if you don't mind." If they put their arm around you, you can be very direct and say, "I prefer you don't do that. I don't really feel like I know you well enough yet." Setting boundaries like that early on make it easier to continue to set boundaries for whatever you're comfortable with on subsequent dates, and it just sets a good precedent. So I love the idea of that. Is it a rule? You decide. Number 8 is just a personal preference of mine, a rule I would like to give to my clients I'll share with you, which is don't try to be too cool. right? Because people aren't really attracted to people who are aloof. They're attracted to people who are warm. So aiming for perfection or covering up mistakes, embrace any mistakes that happen. You spill something, you go, leave it to me. Whatever you want to say, to not try to become uncomfortable that you've made an error. It makes another person feel that you are an accepting person, that you won't be judgmental if they're not perfect. And it makes your closeness grow more rapidly if you're in that kind of a vibe with each other, rather than being more formal and trying to appear suave or super cool. Just be yourself. If you're super suave and cool, then that do you. But being really human is the best way to make a human connection, in my humble opinion. Number 9 is to be clear about what you're looking for, and for sure be honest. Don't just tell somebody what they want to hear. That's not nice. And if you haven't discussed this previously, which I would recommend, if you meet somebody on an app or you're set up by a friend, a matchmaker obviously would know ahead of time and make sure that both people are looking for the same things in the same type of relationship. If you have not found out ahead of time, which is my recommendation, a first date would definitely be the time to clarify that you're both looking for the same thing, whatever that is. No judgments here, but you want to make sure you're on the same page. So if you're looking for a long-term committed relationship, they're looking for somebody to go out with on Saturday nights and maybe occasional travel, perhaps you're not suited for one another. Finding that out on date number 1 before you learn all about them, and like so many other things that they're swaying you from your original goal or intention, what you're looking for in a relationship, would be a good idea. And if it's not that you're on the same page, no problem. Enjoy the rest of your evening with them, their company, and at the end of the date, you say, it was wonderful to meet you. I had a great time. I don't think we're looking for the same things, but I certainly wish you the best and hope you find what you're looking for too. And then number 10 would be you be the one who decides, male or female. You be the one who decides for you whether this date moves on to something more intimate. So whether that's just making out in the parking lot or in the car or going home with somebody. I don't recommend that on a first date personally. If you are interested in developing a romantic relationship, of course, I want you to do you. I know a lot of you don't. You've left me comments on this before that you think that my 30-day rule is too short of a period. So I understand that everybody is different in their time frame as to when they want to become intimate. My concern here is that you don't feel pressured in any way to do something you don't want to because you really like them and you don't want to ruin it, or they're a little bit more willing to continue the date. Whatever reason, I just want to make sure that, again, you're setting your own boundaries. And if you set those boundaries earlier with physical contact and language that you're willing to accept, it may be easier to set those boundaries at this point as well. Well, that was 10 rules for first dates. I hope you found those interesting or helpful. If you did, listen to my mom there. She says, give the episode a thumbs up. I'd appreciate that. I'd look forward to seeing you again soon. So please make sure you subscribe before you leave. Make sure you grab my guide down in the description box on 33 great questions for first dates. It's free, and I'll just send it right to your email. Do that before you leave, and until next time, have a good one.